Hi everyone, I'm Luis Biantilillo from the Feliciano School of Business, and welcome to our weekly Feliciano Live. It's good to be back, and today I'm here with Dr. Portes, a professor of economics here at the School of Business. So it's good to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis. Same name.
Yeah, so we're both Lewises here. I added an extra O. You're L-U-I-S. I'm L-O-U-I-S.
That's right. Yeah.
So that works out. We should be able to have a good conversation about that.
Goes well with the theme of NAFTA.
It does, because it absolutely does. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about NAFTA, the USMCA, and kind of the differences between what will work, what doesn't. And of course, for our viewers at home, wherever you are looking at on our Instagram Live, you could submit questions down below, and we'll be happy to answer them as soon as possible. So you could submit those comments, and you could submit those questions in the comments, and we'll read them on air.
Perfect.
Sounds good?
That's it.
All right, let's get into it. So just for everyone at home, say we know nothing. What is NAFTA?
Well, NAFTA was the first free trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the U.S., signed in 1993, and has had a life of 25 years already. And the idea of the free trade agreement is that goods and services flow freely across borders, and that levels the playing field among the three countries.
And overall, would you say has it been successful?
Yes, definitely. The situation with trade is fascinating because even though there's a lot of sometimes ideology tied to it, this is something that countries do voluntarily.
Right.
Nobody forces them, and historically countries have been trading.
So you think overall it's a positive?
Yes.
It was a positive thing. So if that's true, why is it being replaced by the USMCA?
There are two parts. One is it needed a bit of an update, which is true. And the other is the shift in trade policy that the U.S. is having.
Okay.
In the past, it has been a situation of moving towards rules, a system of rules. And this time around, the rules are being tweaked with conditions.
Okay.
So instead of a rule-based system, we are shifting into a conditional system of trade.
Right. Thank you for that. And for those of you just joining us in, we're talking about NAFTA, the USMCA, all types of trade deals. Remember, you could submit your questions down below. And it looks like we already have one. So let's read a question. So why does President Trump refer to NAFTA as a disaster?
Well, that's a narrative.
Okay.
That's the political punchline. What happens many times in economics, as we are in this academic setting, is that you cannot have counterfactuals. We live only one history, and whatever it is the outcome. There's no way of comparing different scenarios. And so far it has enhanced a lot of trade across the countries and raised the standards of living.
And you mentioned that there's going to be some conditions about the USMCA that NAFTA didn't necessarily have.
Yes.
What are some of those conditions?
Yeah, one way to frame it is that the new USMCA, which a little bit of tongue-in-cheek has the US first and M. And
of course, right.
NAFTA was a North American Free Trade Agreement.
Sure.
Now we have just the USMCA. It's a bit of a 1980s deal in the bulk of the changes. It became more protectionist. It's a free trade, but the point and the purpose of free trade agreements is that all countries are on the same level. And what's happening with the new version of this UMCA, think of a soccer pitch where there are different patches, some higher, some lower.
Right.
So instead of having the flat field, you have this arrangement, unevenness for peculiar industries. In specific, we can think of the car industry.
Okay.
There are a few conditions attached to that. So that would be one of the reasons. If maybe you have it ahead, but I can do it already. For instance, one of the new conditions is that 40% of the content of a car has to be produced by workers who earn $16 or more an hour.
Okay.
So almost half of the car has to be manufactured by workers that earn 16 or more an hour, which is 7 times the wage of Mexico. So that
Okay.
raises
So that's a direct hit at Mexico.
yeah, in a way to sort of shift production towards the U.S. But you see, it's free trade, but
Okay. So what does that mean for consumers? Will we be paying more for cars possibly?
yeah,
Okay.
there are studies. The U.S. Has come out with an independent government body
Mm-hmm.
that assesses the impact of these agreements, the U.S. International Trade Commission. And their assessment is that, well, it can create few jobs in the U.S. However, the impact will be in prices and quantities of cars, less consumption, less production of cars.
Okay. Before we jump ahead of ourselves here,
Yeah, exactly.
the USMCA is not completed yet.
Uh-huh.
What steps do President Trump and Congress have to make sure it's in place?
All right. That was also a peculiarity of the USMCA.
Okay.
It first was negotiated between Mexico and the U.S.
Right.
And then Canada jumped in.
Okay.
Yep. That was when they had settled on that in October of last year. Then now in December 10th of 2019, the House of Congress approved it.
Okay.
Yeah, with a few tweaks on the original version. And what's next is that the U.S. Senate has to approve it,
Mm-hmm.
the same as the Canadian side.
Okay.
So until it's ratified by them, it won't go in effect, and we're still in a NAFTA world.
So say that all happens, all three countries ratify it, it's completed. Is NAFTA out of commission? Does NAFTA just
It
go away?
replaces.
It replaces.
Yeah.
So all the conditions of NAFTA are null and void.
Yeah, we have a new version of the contract, if you like to put it like that.
Okay. For those of you just joining in, I know I said this before, you're more than welcome to comment below, add some questions of your own if you have any that we're not discussing, about NAFTA, about the USMCA, about any trade deals, anything that you have questions about, and we'll read it here and answer it on air.
Sure, that's it.
And it's going pretty well so far. How do you feel about it?
Good?
Good? Good, I'm
Thanks.
glad to hear it. So in your opinion, what countries most benefit out of this new deal?
I would say that benefit is it's too broad of a word. The bigger benefit in a way as a whole would be for Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Mexico, there's a new rule that it is going to have better enforcement of labor standards.
Right.
So that tweak is going to help Mexican workers.
That's going to help the individuals in Mexico.
Exactly, the workers in Mexico, because now they're going to be subject to closer scrutiny
Mm-hmm.
that labor laws
Okay.
are being applied in Mexico. So that is an indirect big gain for the Mexican labor market.
And it could also theoretically help the United States.
Yes,
Right.
yes, of course, because it levels the playing field in a systematic way,
Okay.
not in a pick and choose,
Mhm.
but in a systematic way.
Okay.
In a pick and choose, some of the gains are going to go to the U.S. car industry for that same reasons that the content has to be 40% made by high-earning workers, and the other part is that it was raised that the value added of the car rises from 2/3 of it to 3/4 of it have to be made regionally.
Okay.
Across the three countries.
Mhm.
So that makes it more of a regional trade agreement so that the parts and components really come from NAFTA, and that closes a little bit of the gap that there was some leeway of where can some parts come from.
All right. And it looks like we have another question from
Yes.
one of our viewers. What is the current state of U.S. and Mexico trade relations in light of recent tariffs?
Well, the ones that were imposed originally in June 2018,
Mhm.
we did a Feliciano Live on that.
We did.
Yeah, it was on steel and aluminum. Yeah, so that was one of the first things that were imposed in the bilateral relationship that were not part of NAFTA. And then there was also the threat that the U.S. would withdraw altogether from NAFTA. But that has been ironed out, and that's why now we have this new USMCA ready to be ratified. We're on the second version of it because Congress, before they authorized it, they did some beneficial tweaks that ended up working well for both parties So this has been a both parties initiative.
So to put everything into perspective, what are the biggest benefits of this new deal, and what are the biggest drawbacks of them?
The biggest benefits, it's an update on few things that did not exist in 1993.
Mhm.
So there's more opening on financial services
Right.
and digital technology,
Mhm.
something that didn't happen, even though it was part already of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a free trade agreement that the U.S. withdrew from, but it was borrowed from that.
Okay.
So that's a gain because it makes it more to date. The other gain is that it enforces these labor laws in Mexico. And some of the downsides is that we are going to be diverting some of the trade that used to come from Mexico towards the U.S. The purpose of free trade agreements is to level the playing field, and that countries work as if we were thinking about the division of labor.
Mhm.
One country is good at one thing, the other country is good at another thing, and so on. But in this case, we're raising certain barriers that distort that free trade idea. So one of the downsides is that in the car industry, and the other is that now there is a sunset clause. It's going to be, it will have to be renegotiated every 17 years, I believe. So that distorts somewhat incentives for investment.
Mhm.
Because if there's a risk that in 17 years this will be changed,
Sure.
then long-term investment and cross countries might not work as well,
That makes sense.
which in turn it's sort of a gain for the U.S. because companies then will focus on the larger markets.
So do you think this deal is best for the United States out of the three?
Yeah, there are segments that tilt the balance towards the United States.
Okay. And we have another question from
Sure.
a viewer. This is kind of two topics rolled into one. They mentioned the coronavirus. The coronavirus crisis, I'm going to read off exactly what's written here.
Uh-huh.
How would that benefit Mexico trade with the United States? I'm not,
No, I don't see a direct connection.
yeah, I
right
don't
away.
see a link between the two.
Right away. Maybe there's one through supply chains, but not really
Okay.
for now.
All right. Thank you for that. Overall, final thoughts on the new trade deal?
Well, just to clarify and sometimes to make things a bit more precise. There have been 3 rounds. The first one negotiated between the representatives of the countries. Then that went into ratification by Congress, and there was also this analysis. Right? The big headlines is that the U.S. had wanted to eliminate Chapter 19, which is dispute settlements,
Mm-hmm.
but that was put back into the agreement. Another part was the U.S. had wanted to have more intellectual property protections towards pharmaceuticals, but then when it went to Congress, that was turned down because it raises prices. So the Democrats in that side said we don't want that. And also in Congress, part of the representation for U.S. labor unions were the ones that were happy with tightening the standards on U.S. labor markets, in Mexican labor markets, to even them out with the U.S. So those are mostly, and just the final perspective is that despite some studies say that there will be some job creation in the car industry,
Mm-hmm.
The number is roughly 30,000 jobs that will be created. But in the macro scheme, 30,000 jobs is very little because every month the U.S. economy has been created 200,000. Yeah. So all the fuss about a very large trade agreement across countries just to create 30,000 jobs in the perspective of the national economy, it's incomparable. The U.S. labor market turnover is 5 million a month, changing jobs. New jobs being created around 200,000. So that puts it in perspective.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been our Feliciano Live, our discussion on trade deals, the USMCA, and what it could mean for the three countries, including the United States, Mexico, and Canada. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Portes, for being
Thank
here.
you, Louis.
I've been Louis. He's been Louis without no.
Exactly.
And I've been Louis with the no.
There you go.
We've had a good time today. Thank you for watching. We'll be back in the next few weeks with more Feliciano Lives, more content. You can check all of that out on our Facebook, our YouTube, our Instagram. We got everything on those socials, so be sure to check those out, and we'll see you guys next time.